Hey, so this is the Table of Truth. The Table of Truth is a representation of two ideas that would come into conflict or contact with one another. So if they come into contact with one another, they have some form of collision with each other. The the result of this collision is already predetermined. So if they are both true or both point the same direction, then there is no conflict, right? That's the two check marks there that come into contact. If one of them is true and the other one is false, then they will definitely conflict. They have to, in some way. Then the last one is when two falsehoods come into contact. Now the two falsehoods might conflict or they might not conflict. So I'll just give like a little brief example. You have a pot, and the pot has a color to it. So one person says the color is blue, and then the other person says the color is green. Okay? What if the color is really red? So they're both lying. They're both false. Right? These two falsehoods conflict because they're both saying a different falsehood. So there is a conflict. But if they're both saying blue where it's red, then they don't conflict, right? So that's the idea. So one thing that you can notice here is that whenever there's a falsehood on one or more of the sides, there's a chance of a conflict. What does that mean? Conflict only occurs when one or more of the sides has a falsehood in it. Okay? So anytime there's a conflict, you have to look. You don't look in the first category where there's two truths. You look in one of the other falsehoods. So you have to examine each side and really look, well, is this side false, or are they both false, or is the other side false, right? It doesn't mean one side has to be true, okay? Both sides could be false and they can still conflict. So how do we see conflicts in our society around us? So we can see conflicts when we're talking, when we're having a conversation, and then the truth sort of conflicts one truth with the other. When you compare two things like in science and nature, so if there's a conflict between science and nature, so then you automatically know, because the definition of science is it has to represent nature, you automatically know that nature wins. Nature is always correct. Science is always guessing and trying to match itself to nature. You can have a conflict between two people, and it will end up in court. So any case that comes to court, it doesn't come to court because there was no conflict. It comes to court because there was a conflict with something. It's either a person with the law, or one person with another person, or a police officer with a citizen, or something like that. And so, as an example, if it's a person with a law that comes into conflict and it comes to the court, well, you could say, okay, well, you don't always, like, a court would generally say the law is correct and the person is wrong, so we have to deal with this. You also have to look at the law itself when it comes to court, right? You have to say, is this law correct? Because the person might be 100% correct and the law might be wrong, and then there's a beautiful opportunity here to change a law and make a law more correct. So that's basically how you see it in the world. And then the other addition to this that you can think about is, well, what happens if the future comes into contact with the past, for example? Two different cultures, Africa with America, or, if two different groups of ideals come into contact with one another, what happens? So, for example, the future with the past, we would generally say that, okay, we're getting more and more truths as we develop. So, I mean, if we were to come in contact with the Stone Age and they were to try to teach us about alchemy, or how to light a fire, well, we just understand more. Our truth is just more true than theirs, right? So same thing, if a very future generation from us, maybe like 10,000 years in the future, or 200,000 years in the future, or even a million years in the future, they come back and meet us, well, we're probably wrong. They're probably right. They've figured out a lot more stuff than we have.